Dumelang Sanbonani, good day. As we celebrate Heritage Month, we look back on the history of South Africa from all angles. A while ago, we had the Afrikaners here with the AfriForum. Today, we are talking about the Bantustans, the good and the bad of the Bantustans. One of those Bantustans that were very popular in the 70s was Bophutatswana. In studio, I have Oupa Segalwe, who is an author of the book Lucas Mangope, A Life. Oupa Segalwe was born and raised in Motswedi, the village of Ntate Lucas Mangope, Khosi Lucas Mangope. My brother, welcome on show. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
No, I'm good, man. You know, when I look at this book right here and how you have captured the history of the Bantustan at the time of Tate Mangope, you grew up probably nearer to him because in his village. Give us a background.
So the idea of the book, or what inspired the book, is memories from my childhood.
Yes.
Specifically when I was around the age of 10. This is 1994 now. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of things happening at the time, the winds of change sweeping across South Africa and Bophutatswana in particular, with democracy looming large on the horizon, and homelands or Bantustans being asked to reincorporate into mainland South Africa in preparation for the current dispensation. And of course, Khosi Mangope was one of those who were opposed to the idea of reincorporating into South Africa. And that created a bit of turbulence in that part of the country. And that's around about the time, we were taking notice of all of those as the people of Motswedi.
Yes.
Because you would hear in the news that he's taking a hardline stance to say, no,
he's not joining.
Elections are not going to take place in this part of the country. We would rather remain independent as a homeland and whatever else. So round about that time, there was obviously a lot of conversation, not only in Bophutatswana but across the country, because everyone wondered what was going to happen, what the future had in store for all of us, right? And so in my household, Khosi Mangope was held in high esteem.
Yes.
I often attribute that to the fact that my grandfather worked for him around about that time.
Okay.
So, which would explain why, there were raving reviews about what he had done for the people of Bophutatswana, whether you're talking the kind of infrastructure that you find in places like Mabatu today, whether you are talking the vibrancy, agriculture and the vibrancy of the Bophutatswana economy at large. People talk about how they were never short of jobs and all of that because there were industries. If you go to Hammanskraal, there was a lot of factories there. The same can be said about Mokhwase, not far from Sun City, and all of that. So people looked at those things and they felt that they had it quite good under that administration.
Yes.
But when you interact with other people in the streets back then, you would get some sort of a discord, in a sense that they would say, no, actually, the guys that are bringing about this new dispensation have our interests at heart. They want us to get to a point where we enjoy equal rights with our white counterparts. Things like one man, one vote, which was unheard of for a black man back then. And they were also saying, besides, the Bophutatswana administration had been nothing but corrupt, and they had a whole range of reasons to back up their story. So I grew up with that contradiction about what exactly was the true legacy of this person. But at the same time, and this is now many years later, I noted being one of the consumers of local literature, specifically politics. I noticed that there was a gap in our literature, and that we tend to write well about those who were at the forefront of the struggle for liberation to the exclusion of other role players. And at that point, I took it upon myself to document the story because I felt that this is a story that was worth telling it is very fascinating.
But then there is a part, and I think Mangope would usually get angry whenever they called Bophutatswana a Bantustan. He believed that he was leading a nation of the Botswana people. We are a nation, not a tribe. We should be exclusive. It's our land, it's our people. If there is anyone we should be joining, should be Botswana. I think you also did capture that in your book. Did he not see that as a convenience for the apartheid system as a way to keep apartheid alive? Well, he only saw it from a nationalist idea. We are building for Botswana.
Yeah, you could say so. I mean, if truth be told, all of the homelands or Bantustans were part of a grand scheme by the ruling elites of Pretoria at the time.
Yes.
The National Party, to divide and rule the black people, because they accepted that if they were to go for a system like we have now, where it's one man, one vote, irrespective of the color of your skin, they knew they were going to lose the vote purely because you had blacks in the majority and they were in the minority. So to overcome or to conquer us, they had to divide us according to ethnic groups and give each ethnic group token independence, so that they can maintain their control of the land. So Kgosi Mangope was opposed to Bophutatswana being labeled a Bantustan, and he believed that actually Bophutatswana, or let me rather say the Botswana people were a nation, as you say. That's why he's often referred to as a nationalist. But he would hark back into time, to the times of what was known as the Berlin Conference, or the Scramble for Africa, where Europeans sat in Berlin. And then they looked at Africa, and then they chopped it into chunks and allocated themselves pieces of it as part of the colonialism regime. And then his argument was that the part of South Africa that was Bophutatswana and Botswana were once upon a time one thing.
Yes.
So when the colonialists came in and imposed the border between modern-day Northwest Province and Botswana, they essentially parted into two, a people who were once one, which is why he would argue that if at all the independence of Bophutatswana was not maintained, his second option would be to merge with Botswana, to return those people to where they were, but for the imposition of the border.
Yeah, because we look at some other Bantustans, what Matanzima in the Eastern Cape, there were many, the Boa and all of that. Then the question would be, what made Bophutatswana different from other Bantustans? Because we seemed like we got it going for a while, and other Bantustans were not progressive as Bophutatswana.
Well, look, there were, pockets of, development here and there in other homelands. But I suppose they were not as endowed as Bophutatswana. But other people would say it all boils down to the visionary that was at the helm of Bophutatswana, in reference to Kgosi Mangope, compared to his counterparts elsewhere. They felt that he was gifted with the wisdom, to bring about all of that development that you saw. But in truth, if you go to Leboa now, Leboa home, where you find the legislature for the provincial government of Limpopo and a lot of government, buildings there, those come from the era of the Bantustans. If you go to all the hotel establishments that were previously under Southern Sun, even in Ulundi, in KZN and elsewhere, they came from that era, brought about by Saul Kessner's collaboration with the leaders of the time. In KwaZulu, of course, it was Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. So you have those pockets of development here and there. But as you correctly say, Bophutatswana was seen as the standard bearer because it was head and shoulder above the rest in terms of development. Whether you're talking the arts, you're talking media, you think of Bob TV, Radio Bob, Radio Mabatu TV. They had a university of their own called Unibo now, Northwest University.
Yeah, because the story thing, the funny thing about the university is that it was built by communities contributing 10 rands, I think, or 5 rands, whatever they had, to build the university.
Yeah. So it was what we would call a letsema, where you mobilize communities to, play an active role in that. So there was some sort of a levy, but obviously did not fund the entire project. Some of the funds were mobilized by the government, but it was a levy that was, presided upon by the government itself to bring about that kind of system. But even before the structures were built, you will see somewhere in the book I referred to the Lekela Commission. Dr. Lekela was appointed by Lucas Mangope to chair a commission that looked into changing the education system in Bophutatswana, moving away from the Bantu education, which was the order of the day under South Africa. So the Lekela Commission came up with a blueprint for the kind of education system that was going to be applicable in Bophutatswana, right from early childhood development all the way to the university and even vocational education. You might recall the Manpower Center that was part of the system there in Bophutatswana.
I'm gonna come to this because most of Mangope's claim to rule, if there's a way to use, was from the kingdom, whereby he was seen as a monarch and less of a political figure. And you also touch base on the book to his links to the Mogales, his links to, I think also Molotlehi at some point had to run to Botswana. So as he's in power and as he's rising up, what is the link between Bohosi Botswana at the time?
Okay, so you will see that all of the leaders of homelands or Bantustans, all of them come from royalty. They were chiefs, or they came from a family of chiefs. That is precisely because before the current political system was introduced, natives in South Africa used that system, the monarchy system.
Yes.
You can even go as far back as the days of Shaka and them. So when the nationalist government introduced this new system, this is around about 1959.
Yes.
They introduced a 3-tier governance system that was going to run things among all the ethnic groups. The 3-tier system starts with what we call tribal authorities. This is at local level.
Yes.
The leadership of a village.
The Khosan.
Yes, the tribal authority. And then the second tier is the regional authority, which is made up of different tribal authorities.
Yes.
Right? And then at the very top, you have territorial authority. So in Bophutatswana, that it was before we actually knew it to be Bophutatswana, it was the Tswana Territorial Authority.
Yes,
so you would have had the Zulu Territorial Authority in KwaZulu and so forth. And all the players in this kind of system were all traditional leaders because, as I said, tribal authorities made up regional authorities, and then the territorial authorities were also made by people selected from the regional authorities. The leadership of the Tswana Territorial Authority was made up of Khosi Tidimani Pilani of the Bakatla Bakafela in Pilanesberg, in Moruleng.
Yes.
And then with Khosi Mangope serving as his deputy. Now, as the years roll by, they get to a point where they are given self-governance. Before independence, there was another system of self-governance, which is where now they start creating a system similar to what we have now, where you have portfolios, Department of Public Works, this and that, and then you have a chief minister as at the helm. And later on, in the late 70s, when independence is introduced, you start seeing the establishment of political parties. Now it's a departure from that system of chiefs or a monarchy kind of setup. You see political parties, 2 political parties introduced. The one was called Oupa Segalwe,
Yes.
led by Kgosi Tidimani Pilane. And then the one that was led by Kgosi Mangope was called Bophutatswana National Party.
Yes.
Yes, and then they go to elections, the National Party wins, and then that's how Kgosi Mangope was installed at the helm. But of course, later on, there was strife within the Bophutatswana National Party, such that Kgosi Mangope then broke away to lead a splinter group that established what was known as Bophutatswana Democratic Party.
Yeah,
that is
BDP.
the party, yes, that then governed Bophutatswana to the end.
Then I'm gonna come to, because I remember at the time people like Nelson Bo Mandela at the time, Bo Andrew Mlangeni, Bo Oliver Tambo. These were the people that Mangope was not a stranger to. You touch base on the book that he was at St. Petersburg, where he was with Andrew Mlangeni and others. As a trajectory, what do you think influenced his idea not to go towards this route of liberation struggle, but rather to go to pursue more of a nationalist attitude?
So his introduction to those role players was much earlier in his life. It was in his teens that he was at St. Peter's, where he got to interact with the likes of Ntate Andrew Mlangeni, and O.R. Tambo was their maths and science teacher. And as the story goes, O.R. Tambo used to, instill ANC Youth League ideas in their minds at the time after school. And at some point, Kgosi Mangope actually attended a meeting of the Youth League. I've heard people saying he was a member of the Youth League. I did not find that evidence. What I did find is that he did attend one meeting of the Youth League in Johannesburg and actually ran into trouble because they were confronted by police and asked why are they out at night, because at the time there was a curfew imposed on black people that you can't be out in the street after 9 o'clock. So
Yes.
at that time, he really identified with what the Youth League stood for. If you recall, the Youth League came into being, among others, as a result of the view amongst the youth leaguers at the time that, the mother body was very soft when it came to confronting the enemy that was the government of the day, and they wanted, more drastic action, which would in later years lead to the armed struggle. So when I read, some of the things that were written about him from back then, it appears that he was opposed to the whole idea of armed struggle. He believed that freedom could be attained in a peaceful way and all of that, and that's where he departed from the ideas that the rest of them were influenced by.
Because when most people at the time looked at Bantustans, from history books, I heard of them as white arrangements to, as you said earlier, to divide black people and to put them into those corners. And either in order for one to travel, will have to carry a pass into the city, and that system in certain homelands. To some people, they started embracing it as umhlaba wabo, is their land. So did also build nationalism amongst black people in those Bantustans to say umhlaba maXhosa or maZulu, and in that unfolding, did you see that there was the mentality was the same, but the application was different? Did Gacha think the same thing? Did Matanzima think the same thing? The only difference is that Mangope was just maybe had a visionary for Bophutatswana.
I think the idea from the midwives of apartheid was exactly to achieve that, to keep black people apart along ethnical lines, right?
Yes.
And then in that setting, it would be easy to control them, as opposed to having a hegemonic mass of black people to deal with, right?
Yes.
So what Kgosi or Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi told me when I had a sit down with him was that they had a pact, though unwritten, as leaders of self-governing states before any of them could be granted quasi-independence, to say we are aware that these people in Pretoria are going to offer us this so-called independence, but we are going to reject it outright because we see what their intention is. And for a while it was so until one day when he was abroad, he picked up from the radio that Bophutatswana had opted to accept independence. He told me he never got to ask Lucas Mangope why he broke away from their pact to accept a token independence from Pretoria. So you can see that the leaders of homelands were alive to what was happening. They were alive to yes, as to why Lucas Mangope would take a different approach is anyone's guess. But when you read some of the speeches he delivered back in the day, including the one that he read on Independence Day on the 6th of December 1977. He said he accepted independence because he was opposed to racialism or even racism.
Yes.
Which was mind-boggling because the very acceptance of independence...
We
were breathing life into the apartheid scheme of keeping black people apart. I mean, keeping blacks and whites apart, and within black communities, keeping ethnic groups apart for purposes of divide and conquer. So it was difficult to understand his way of thinking. One of my biggest regrets, as I always say, is that I never got to sit across from him like we are doing now, because I could have put those questions to him to get into his mind, to understand as to what really was the thinking, including when in later years he saw that this system is not working, and yet he still insisted on maintaining the status quo at the time.
We look at, I think, before the independence, there was a debate around consolidation of land, and I'm sure the Zulus also had the similar thing. Within the Bantustans, whites still had some portions of lands within these Bantustans. Am I correct?
Yeah. So let's look specifically at Bophutatswana. It was a very strange country, from a geographical point of view.
Yeah.
Because it was divided into chunks of land, about 6 or so, that were unconnected at all. And the reason was that in between these unconnected chunks of land were white areas. In other words, areas that the white people were not keen to give up for the purposes of consolidation, because consolidation meant having one enclave, a whole, not broken up into bits and pieces.
Yes.
So you will see you have Mabatu. This is now the part where you have a mega city and all those. You need what in Mahikeng.
Yes.
But Mahikeng, the town, was white South Africa.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Similarly, in his own backyard in Lihurutsi, the rural part, the villages, Mutswedi, Nokana, Borakalo, those were black areas.
Yes.
But when you get to Zeerust, it's white. That's why I don't know if you are familiar with that part of the country. Between Zeerust and Velvedacht, there used to be a Home Affairs office there. Until recently, it was a Home Affairs office for that part of the country.
Yes.
But before 1994, that was actually a border post between Lihurutsi and Zeerust. I actually recall going to town, and then the taxi would be stopped there by armed men, and then people would be asked to produce their identity documents and passports. And then after compliance, you carry on with your trip. And then the same thing would happen on your way back. But this was within Bophutatswana. But because in Bophutatswana there were parts that were white and those that were black, you had to struggle with that. So you had
your Breds, you had your Vryburg.
Exactly.
You had Ventersdorp.
Rustenburg. Okay. All those towns, all the towns were white. The rural part was Bophutatswana.
So literally, he was literally just ruling over black people, but while at the same time, opening the door for whites to still have power and influence in the land.
And it was an administrative nightmare, because one of the tenets of sovereignty at country level is that you should be able to manage your borders. But you can imagine how difficult it was to manage the border in that kind of setting.
So these white communities, were they independent or were they South Africa?
They were South Africa. So that's why you had to produce a passport when you crossed that border. Going shopping. If you are I don't know if you are familiar with Zeras, but that's where we go to town to do our shopping. So we were virtually, literally, actually, we were shopping in another country.
What?
Just to go buy bread, you go to a foreign land to go buy bread
and then go back
home. Yeah.
Then in terms of Natal, right, I think the Zulus still have a strong hold somehow of influence in KwaZulu-Natal. Was the same setup the same way?
I haven't really studied the state of play back in the day in respect of Natal or other homelands, but I would assume there was something like that, because now we call it KwaZulu Natal, but you had KwaZulu and you had Natal. And then Natal, that's where you would find the Indians and the white communities and all of that. And KwaZulu, that's where Prince Buthelezi was more in charge. But as I say, it's not an area I focused on when I was researching this book.
I'm going to come to the good and the bad, right?
Yeah.
We know of Mangope, as you wrote here, about his relationship with the Holy Land, with Israel, and how he literally started building Mabato Stadium, working hands in hands with the Israelis at the time. What would you say was good about the Bantustans, and what would you say was the worst about it?
Look, the facts speak for themselves. First and foremost, homelands as an idea were a bad idea, to put it bluntly.
Yes.
Because, you can imagine you are called an independent state or sovereign country, and yet your existence was determined by a parliament in another country. So, Bophutatswana, for it to come into existence, South Africa had to pass a law in its own parliament in Cape Town, which means South Africa, or which means Bophutatswana is a creature of South Africa.
Office,
and yet these are supposed to be two
separate
independent
nations.
Countries.
Yes.
So you can see from there that there was something wrong with the system. But be that as it may, Lucas Mangope, upon taking independence and upon being elected the president of that homeland, he goes on an extensive program to try and convince the world that indeed we are an independent country. Because at the time, no country in the world recognized Bophutatswana as independent. And Bophutatswana was the second homeland to accept independence after Transkei. So at the time of Transkei's independence, the Organization of African Union, the predecessor of the African Union, it was called the Organization of African Unity, which is the predecessor of the African Union that we know today, actually, passed a resolution in terms of which they did not recognize the Transkei, purely because it was a creation of apartheid, and Bophutatswana fell into that category. So anyway, Lucas Mangope takes up this independence, and then he starts by repealing laws that would have been applicable under South Africa.
Okay.
So as to say, here there's no racism, here there's no apartheid, we are a free country, equal rights and all of that. You see that in the constitution of Bophutatswana. It looks in some ways similar to the constitution that we have now, because in its chapter 2 you have the Bill of Rights, which lists all of these rights that black people could not enjoy under South Africa, which is why he had to repeal those laws. He had to review the constitution. I mean, not the constitution. He had to review the. I mentioned this earlier on, and now it slips my mind. The education system.
Yes.
And do away with Bantu education and introduce a system that he felt was going to work for the people there. He even introduced non-racial laws. For instance, under South Africa, a white man could not marry a black woman and vice versa.
Yes.
In Bophutatswana, you could do that. So people from South Africa who were in a multiracial relationship could travel to Bophutatswana and have their marriage solemnized there and go back as a couple. Other things like your gambling and so forth were forbidden in South Africa, but legal in South Africa, which is why you saw all sorts of hotels sprouting all over the place. The Carousel, Sun City, Morula Sun, all of them, they had casinos. And then white people who enjoyed gambling could cross over to Bophutatswana to go and play those kind of things. So that's how he built the economy there, because you had a very vibrant tourism, industry, bubbling there in Bophutatswana, because those people who were really into those kind of things from South Africa, whether black or white, they could come over to Bophutatswana to enjoy themselves. But apart from that, we have already talked about the infrastructure expansion that was experienced in that part of the world. Now, other people looked at all of those things and said, well, it's well and good that you have all of these things. You have your Bophutatswana University, you have your manpowers, you have Bomabana and so forth. But as far as we are concerned, those are nothing but fruits of a poisoned tree. The poisoned tree being apartheid South Africa, and then extending into South Africa to bring all these good things. But when you look at the system holistically, it was rotten to the core. Other people enjoyed those things and said, look, it's much better than living under the old system. So you had that contradiction. To this day, we still have people who argue that, no, we'd rather be independent, given their frustration.
Keep exit. Exit. Yes. Because I think I was going to say that to say, and what I'm hearing a lot from a lot of people is that we didn't really need to become part of South Africa. We had our own democracy here. We had our own education. Our culture was intact. I think the only thing that we had to do was to take the lands that were under the Afrikaners at the time, and maybe fight to take those lands. And then from there, either South Africa becomes a democracy or it becomes whatever. We will work with them depending on how does it benefit our people here. So even if we could erode apartheid here in South Africa, we still wanted to maintain that in the as Mangope was fighting even towards when Mandela came to see them and said, you know what, it's fine. You guys go ahead with the democracy that side. It's not a problem, but we still want to maintain what we have here as the Botswana people. Would you say he was wrong?
Well, it's one of those contentious issues, because as we said, I think we spoke of that he had a number of options that he placed before those who were trying to persuade him to let Bophutatswana reincorporate into South Africa. The first prize was to maintain independence, failing which he would rather reincorporate or merge Bophutatswana with Botswana, because, as I said, he
common culture.
Yes, yes. Failing which he would have preferred a federation kind of setting, where you have the central government, but then you have federal states like you have in the US.
Yes.
And that is a view that he shared with Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And I have read that to some extent that influenced the current setting that we have with the provinces, because some people to this day argue that we didn't really dismantle homelands, because these provinces are glorified homelands, because they are still the Zulus there, the Tswanas there, the Sothos there, and so forth. So, but as I say, it's a very divisive issue. Some people feel that he was right, others felt that he was wrong. And those that feel he was wrong say that when he took up platforms, for instance, at CODESA to say Bophutatswana will remain independent for the next 100 years, he spoke as though he was the spokesperson for the Botswana as a whole. But the reality on the ground was that there were huge chunks of citizens of Bophutatswana who were opposed to that system, who would have preferred that he reincorporates and joins all the other homelands. So this is to say, although he was...
Is this the Popo Molefes?
No. So, yeah, you are right. You are right in saying it is the Popo Molefes and all of that. Basically, it's those who were part of the liberation struggle, but fighting from within the homeland. Yeah, there was a whole lot of them. There was quite a lot of them spread across the country, whether you're talking the Odi side in the east, even in his own backyard, there were people who were mobilizing, running the ANC recruitment drive underground in Motswedi and the neighboring villages. So there was always dissent within Bophutatswana. It wasn't like everyone was for the maintenance of the status quo.
But then, and I'm going to come to this part, I mean, culture, traditional leaders, politics, Botswana, they've always been Batumamolao and all of that. I think even Xhosa themselves also had that thing of monarchy, power, or traditional leaders being in charge. Do you feel that as of recent, those powers have been somehow abandoned, and the state as we have it today has more power than the traditional leaders in communities?
It's a very controversial matter, as you might be aware, because there was, I think it's in the interim constitution of 1993. The Khosi were given some powers, but with the later constitution, the one that is currently in force, I think some of those powers were watered down a bit. Yes, but this is not to say the Khosi do not have a role to play now. We have a house of traditional leaders now, both nationally and in the provinces. And the Khosi do play some role, even in the affairs of the municipality. When, I forget what they call this system where they consult communities before they can roll out infrastructure.
IDP. Yes.
The Khosis are supposed to participate in that kind of process to bring about development and all of that. And there's constant interaction between the Khosi and municipalities, for instance. Although sometimes it results in clashes. You'll find that the government allocates a piece of land or identifies a piece of land for the purposes of building RDP houses for people.
Yes.
And then the Khosi comes into the picture to say, but this is my land. How do you allocate, without consulting me? But the law is being improved. I think even recently the applicable law there was improved to harmonize relations between those two systems, because they are recognized. The Constitution gives us the right to practice our culture and tradition, and that we must not be discriminated against on the basis of the cultures and the traditions, the customs that we practice. And that simply means that you cannot just do away with things like traditional leadership, because they are at the core of our traditions and customs.
Yeah, I think maybe most people will tend to maybe question the influence. How far can it really go? Or are they just ceremonial, the premier is here, the Khosi thing, but people take premier serious than Khosi, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to come to this. Then came the scrapping of the Bantustans to a unified South Africa, was apart from Mangope, where all other leaders in agreement that let's scrap this system and let's embrace this provincial one South Africa.
When you go to the records of CODESA, you will see that all of them, except for Kgosi Mangope and Prince Mangope Buthelezi, agreed with what was put on the table. And Kgosi Mangope, for instance, was opposing on the grounds that we have already traversed. Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, on the other hand, was opposed to that system on political grounds. For instance, he would argue that they were not properly consulted when a pact that was signed between the ANC and the National Party and all other parties that were represented at CODESA was put together. They were not consulted, and they would have preferred to be consulted so that they can insert some of the things that they preferred into that. And even with the interim constitution and all of those things, some of the things that he wanted, specifically Prince Buthelezi, was that federal approach to governance.
Okay.
But of course, we know that at the 11th hour, he switched sides and then and joined. That's why he was able to participate in that make or break election of April 27, 94. But Kgosi Mangope stayed steadfast until the very last minute, at which point nothing could be done because his party did not take part in that election. If you
in
recall.
1994, Botswana did not vote.
No, they voted because he was overpowered. Remember, Bophutatswana collapsed in March 1994, and with its collapse, the IEC was able to move in and conduct a voter education here and there and registrations, preparing the people there for the elections. So, as a result, the Botswana were able to vote, but his own party, which governed Bophutatswana up to that point, could not participate in that election. The first time it got to participate was in 1999. That is in relation to national elections, but they did participate in the initial local government elections, which took place in late 95 and early 96.
So, Oupa, yes, reading this book and trying to make sense of everything, to consolidate everything, most people, I'm sure that you know this from Kwagai, they're all in the reminiscing of the past in terms of the Bantustans. If you meet the Zulus, they will tell you, we built university, we had these things going on. Matanzima, I'm not sure what was his strong development, but I know there is an airport in Tata that is written Matanzima. And where do you think the current government got it wrong? Or where do you think the level of development that most people got to see during the apartheid time, where did we lose it?
Look, in my opinion, the tendency to look back and reminisce on days gone by or be nostalgic about the past is brought about by people's frustration with what they perceive as the failures of the current government.
Yes.
So in 1994, a lot of things were promised. I think the ANC's motto was a better life for all.
Yes.
Mangope
calls there non-ngauza. We killed them. I'm coming to save you. Yes.
Yeah. So the government promised a better life because the main campaign ticket was transformation. We are transforming from apartheid to a better life.
A new dawn.
Yes, all the things that we were denied we were going to have. Black people, for instance, could not own property under apartheid. All those houses in Soweto that people lived in, they didn't own them. They were paying rent. You couldn't own property. So a better life meant we were going to do away with all of those things. You
ownership,
could own
in power.
Property just like your white counterpart could own property. But maybe it raised expectations and people expected all of those things to happen overnight. And then when it took longer, they got frustrated. And this is why roundabout elections,
yes,
that sentiment comes up a lot, especially in the former Bophutatswana. You will see, just when you Google, you'll see articles that were published around about each election going back into time. They will say life was better under Bophutatswana. Today we don't have water, we don't have roads, there's no maintenance of infrastructure and all of that.
Yeah.
But I often say to people it's an unfair comparison because the population was smaller at the time. And you could manage to bring about this and that. And it wasn't even perfect because where I come from, for instance, we had all sorts of things, but we didn't have electricity, we didn't have running water. Those are the things that came after 1994.
Okay.
But as I say, the population was smaller at the time. And right now we are much, I think we are over 60 million now. So it's not easy to run. Yeah, but there has been progress, if truth be told, in terms of development and service delivery, but things could be better. When I spoke to Ntate Popo Molefe, he made that concession to me that, look, we came in and then we said we were going to do this and that, but the reality is that we could have done better. We are guilty of some of the things that we said Lucas Mangope was guilty of. And here he was speaking specifically in reference to the Square Commission, which investigated allegations of corruption under Bophutatswana. And he was essentially saying, look, we said this man was corrupt and all of that, and what did we do when we came in? Some of our own people have conducted themselves in far worse.
I mean, it's sad now when you hear that there was an internet cafe that was built for 150 million. It's a shack with 3 computers. And you ask, but what was Mangope handled? Just now in Ratlo municipality where I'm from, they bought 22 laptops for 730,000, almost a million for 22 laptops. You look at Mahikeng, how dirty it has become, the former capital of the time. The roads, the way they have been, it's literally an abandoned province. Northwest is an abandoned province. I don't know if these guys wake up every morning saying they're going to work. What are they going to do? Because you don't see it. It's abandoned. And to some, like even the Eastern Cape, for example, I was there last year traveling around. You get to see that most of whatever exists there, it exists as structures that were probably done during the apartheid age. However, ever since then, there's just been stuck. So I think maybe that's what pushes people to end up saying, maybe we must get this independence back, or either we must find a way to stop relying from the top bottom, but rather start having a system of from bottom to top.
Yeah, the homesickness, the homeland homesickness. It comes from exactly that, the frustrations with how the current government has fared over the last 30 years, such that I believe if everything was hunky-dory in respect of service delivery, infrastructure development, and all of that, and nobody would look back because they would be satisfied with the deal they got. But because of the promise of a better life and the shortcomings of the current administration, people are then forced to look back and yearn for that time that is long gone. And personally, I would never yearn for that time because I think things could be better, but we have better freedom now. If you think of
it's a freedom in poverty. I think that's the problem with this freedom. This freedom is you're free, but you are hungry. I think it's better to be full than complain than to be.
So you'd rather be in bondage, but with a full stomach.
So I'm gonna wrap it up with this because I think there might have been some sort of a lifestyle changes at that time after 1994. Botswana now are becoming one part of a country. Some people have never really met. Like when I was growing up. And you are right. These guys, the Afrikaners, wanted to divide us according to ethnic lines because we will call them Matebeli, right? I think every other tribe that was not Botswana was called Matebeli. And we had that, and coming to live with them, now people getting to remarry and build this society that is multi-diverse and all of that. What would you say became a challenge at that time or became a good thing about it?
Look, the unification of people, whether it's across the color line or ethnic lines, was a good thing for the country. I was joking the other day with my friends that back during the Bophutatswana days, I had this cousin who owned a battery-powered stereo.
Yes.
Right? And then he used to play these struggle songs. He owned a record of Blondie Makene and Amakaban. So he would play these records, which my grandmother hated because if she was found out that her kids are playing these records, which were anti-Bophutatswana, anti-Mangope, she was going to be in trouble. One of the songs went, Tina Lomhlaba Sugezile. Tina Lomhlaba Sugezile. Yeah. And exactly.
Yes.
Now, because we were in Bophutatswana, we sang these songs or we listened to them. We didn't know what it means, right? And then much later in life, I'm now at university in Gauteng.
Sure.
This is now in the New South Africa.
Yeah.
In my class, I have a person from KZN, a person from Limpopo, and all of that. And we mix, we learn each other's language. For the first time, I learned that Lomhlaba had nothing to do with Lohotlaba, as in to stab. all along in my mind, I imagined this violence that someone is stabbing the other with a spear. Yeah. And then you realize later, no, actually it was about the land.
Yes, yes.
But imagine now if you had been confined to, that's all we would have known. We would have spoken our language and nothing else. Exactly.
Yeah. My brother, well done on this masterpiece. Thank you. This right here, Lucas Mangope, A-Life, Oupa Segalwe. What would you say? What would you want a reader like myself? What would be the takeaway from this? What is the intention here with this book?
There are many lessons to be drawn from the book for everyone, really. And then I'll highlight a few. I was saying to somebody the other day that had a book like this been published much earlier, maybe as a country we could have avoided certain pitfalls that we have seen some of our leaders falling victim to. You made an example of Gupta in reference to
the Israel guy.
Yes, to Shabtai Kalmanovich. That story is typical what we would call today capture of
the state.
Government.
Yes.
So if we had been exposed to that kind of thing, maybe we could have picked up the signs earlier and avoided certain things that have since happened. But you also look at let me look at some of the peripheral issues that you find in the book, like in respect of the politics of the UCDP, for instance.
Yes.
You will see, I think I dedicate about 4 or so chapters to the politics of the UCDP. And in particular, I want to highlight internal democracy as an issue. To say it led to the demise of that party. This is a party that was at some point the official opposition in the Northwest Province and also represented in parliament at a slender caucus of about 3 members in the National Assembly. This is now between 1999 and 2009. It had a representation in the legislature in the Northwest and in the in the National Assembly. But look, after 2014, it is wiped off the face of South African politics. You don't see it represented anywhere.
Yes.
Such that in the very recent election of March 31st, it could not register to participate in those elections. It is done. And when you look at what exactly led to its undoing, it was the lack of internal democracy and personality cult politics, because people who were the core of its membership were there because of Kosi Mangope rather than what the party stood for. Such that when he was expelled from the party and lost his leadership position, its support started to wane. And as we speak, it's nowhere to be found. Now, this is a lesson for other political parties to look at the question of internal democracy to say, if we go down this route, we could end up like that political party and be rendered, irrelevant and die a slow death.
Yeah, I'm hoping the leaders of EFF and others.
I don't want to name any political party. I don't want trouble.
I think you are right to say, to some extent, some parties are built on personalities, and once the personality moves, the party dies. And I think the UCDP was that one party that most people voted because they were Botswana. There's like a Botswana nationalism. Botswana, Bophutatswana, we're voting for our party. But I think largely for some time, the ANC was known as a Xhosa party, and it became more of a nationalist party. But we knew IFP was more Zulu. I don't know, what was the party Yamapedi they vendor? Because we're never really.
I don't remember. But coming back to that issue of internal democracy, just one example. If you look at the constitution of the UCDP, it's like all other parties. It provides for regular elections. So there's something that they call Congress, which is their elective conference. Every 5 years, they must go to Congress to elect leadership. But with regards to the UCDP, some of the supporters of Kgosi Mangope at Congress would just rise from the floor and say, look, we are happy with this man's leadership. We don't think it's necessary to hold an election in this Congress. And he would also let them be. And then that's how he would be retained in the leadership position, such that he led that party for 40 years. But it was creating resentment within the party. And that's what led to the internal strife that saw him expel people. They went to court and then they were brought back in. Then they expelled him. And that's when he retired from politics for good now.
And disappeared until even though there was a painful story where he was not offered a state funeral. I think maybe it's just the historical clash between him and the ANC.
That's correct.
Do you think that was the reason why he was not offered a state? I mean, like, de Klerk was given a state funeral and he was not necessarily a friend of the ANC, but why would not Mangope also be given the same thing in the spirit of reconciliation?
It was the result of that age-old tension between the party and him. The stance that he took when everyone was going this way and then he was insisting on going the opposite direction. So that grudge never died down. It followed him to the grave.
My brother, thank you for coming through. Thank you for the whole day, but thank you very much. Your book is out. Do you wanna? There's a camera behind me there. Tell them where to find you, where to find the book, and
so
the moment is there.
The book is available at all bookstores, exclusive books, bargain books, even independent bookstores like Bookstore Capital in Melville. But for more information about promotions and all of that, you can follow me on X at Segalwe. I'm also available on Facebook and Instagram, Oupa Segalwe. Thank you.
Yes, that's Oupa Segalwe, author of Lucas Mangope, A Life. We are looking back on the history of the Bantustans in South Africa. You know, most of them were in Ciskei, Leboa, KwaZulu-Natal, and Bophutatswana. This is our history as South Africans. We are once a divided nation, and today we are a one nation, united in our diversity. Other than that, this was Beyond the Ballot. I am Bafana Modise, proudly brought to you by a podcast party where great minds don't think alike. Ciao, ciao. See you next time.